In this tutorial, I'm going to show you step by step of how you can build a recursive function that works like this. What's special about this custom function is that this function calls himself within its own calculation formula. So this is kind of like a function within its own function within its own function kind of thing. And I'm going to show you step by step how to build exactly this recursive function, as well as give you a little bit of idea of how you can apply it in your own FileMaker solution coming up. Hey, what is up everybody? Welcome to another FileMaker beginner tutorial. My name is Sunny Chu, and today the topic that we are going to talk about is recursive function. Now, this is probably one of the most difficult topic if you are a beginner FileMaker user, and that's because this whole thing is a very abstract concept. This whole recursive function thing is where we have a function that we call himself within the function, and while you're calculating this inside himself, it's going to call himself again. It's kind of like a looping thing, like the movie Inception, where you have a dream within a dream within a dream, and this time it's kind of like a function within a function within a function. So it's very abstract, very difficult to use. But the great thing about this recursive function is that once you know how to set it up, it can help you do some really nice things. So for example, if I look into the after file for this tutorial, on the left side I have like a list of items here. So apple, banana, pear, and orange. Now if I click convert, it's going to add like a arrow key on the left side to each of the value. Now notice that this is one single field, so it's not like multiple records. So basically what it's doing, the recursive function, is that it kind of recurs and kind of like loop through each of them. Apple, banana, pear, and orange, and add like this arrow key to each of them. And these are not done with scripts and loops. This is done in one single calculation formula. So if I look at the final answer, it's just something like this. Once you set up this custom function, that is a recursive function, all you need to do is to place this one thing into this one exact function, and it's going to do the rest for you. Now, it doesn't really matter if you have like 4 values or like tomato. I know it's probably not a fruit, like 4 values or 5 values here. This recursive function is able to do it regardless of how many values you have. So if I add melon again, click convert, same here. So it's a very useful technique that has a wide range of application. So without further ado, let's get started. So I think the first thing I want to do is, I know a lot of beginner has trouble trying to figure out the logic of how to set up this function. So what I want to do first is I want to give you a conceptual idea using this little PowerPoint that I have created, just to give you a better idea of conceptually what we're going to be doing. So let's dive into our PowerPoint. So basically, as you can see, the first page here is kind of like a reference to the movie Inception, but this recursive function thing, it's like a function within a function. That's just a very dry joke, I guess. But anyways, let's get into the logic of how to set up a recursive function. So let's click play and let's get started. So, okay, let's go to the first slide, which is I want to show you the thinking process of when you're building a recursive function, how you should think about the situation. So basically, when you have a recursive function, let's say this add arrow is the custom function that we're going to build, and we place in this whole list of value into the add arrow area. Now, what we want to do first is to pick out the first item inside the list. Pick out like that, apple, and then we're going to do whatever we need to add to it. So in our special case, this is going to be adding like an arrow key here. And then once we pick out the first item and add whatever we need to do, we pick out the rest. So orange, banana, pear, pick out the rest and put it into the same function again. So same thing. Once we go into this function, we're going to pick out the first item within this list, do whatever we need to, and then pick out the rest like here. So now we're going to put those again into another set of the same recursive function. Same thing, we're going to pick out the first one, do whatever we need, and then take out the rest, put it into the function, pick out the first one, and then add in whatever we need. Now, the interesting thing in this part is we are still going to pick out the rest. But now there's nothing inside the rest. There's only one lines of item here. So the first line is basically the final product that we're going to have. So we are still going to put it into the final custom function. But this time, since there's nothing in there, we need to set up some sort of mechanics for us to detect when it's empty. Then we stop the whole function within the function thing and start going back out one layer at a time. So we do something like this. Clean this out, we are back to this layer. Clean this out and then push this back. Clean this out, push this back. Clean this out, put this back, and clean the final thing out. So we're gonna have all these things done in a calculation, and we kind of polish all of our data using this method and adding an arrow in this case. Now, the logic that I just displayed to you has a few parts to it. So let's talk about the logic. There's a few things that we need to do within that calculation formula. And number one is that we need to take the first value and then convert it. So taking out the first value and then adding the arrow to it. The second part is we want to take out the rest and then put it back into the custom function itself. And then after that, we need to also set up a mechanics. If what we have is an empty thing, then we stop the whole custom function altogether. And then finally, we need a way for us to combine all the different values. So going back up the layer and then combining these values together and getting the final result. So basically, we need to do these four things within that custom calculation function. So let's go into the database and see how we can achieve that. So let's go into the before file and double click, and let's open up this before file. Well, I'm just going to leave it here. And so basically what I want to do now is I want to just give you a little bit of idea of how this file is set up. It's basically a very simple database. Go to File, Manage Database. It's only like a one table, two fields in there, and there's only one record here. So it's a very simplistic database, and the left side is the before, the right hand side is the after. Now, this convert button is linked to one of the scripts within the script area. This recursive function script is the final button that we are going to be using. When we click this, it triggers the script. It's pretty simple, and all we need to do is to set up that custom function and then place one script here, and that's basically it. Now, what I want to show you is I just want to give you a very quick idea of what the final function will look like. So I'm just going to click into the after file, go to File, Manage Custom Function, double click into the arrow key, and we have something in here. Now, inside this calculation formula, there's a few elements to it. We have this get value, value count, write values, and also we also have this let function. Now, these are basically the building blocks of that final recursive function. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain each of these functions one by one. These are all native FileMaker functions, and I'm going to explain these one by one of how they work. And if in case you're already like experienced enough to know exactly what they do, you can just skip to the timestamp that I show in the screen right now to go dive in straight into the, well, actual building the custom recursive function part. But if not, then I'm going to explain these one by one right now. So let's click cancel, and let's go back out and cancel, and let's go into our, well, let's close our after file. Don't save anything, and let's open up our before file. And what we're going to do now is let's go into File, Manage, Custom Function. Now, in case you don't have this option, just know that if you are using FileMaker 16 or the previous version, you will need a FileMaker Pro Advanced to access custom function. If you're FileMaker 17 or more, then you can open this function by going into, well, Preference. One second, like this. Preference. And then you can check this, use Advanced tool, and then you'll be able to open up this custom function feature. That's something you want to know. And let's go into File, Manage, let's manage script. And what I'm going to do now, as I said, is to explain each of these basic functions and just show you how they works. Now, the first one, it's going to be get value. Basically, get value is used to get a specific value in a list of value. So this is a list of 4 items, and I want to get something out of this list. Now, what I can do is do something like this. So if I type in get value, and I place in this before file as the first parameter, that's my input, that's the full list of item, and I pick number 2 as the second parameter. If I click OK right now, click OK, let me just hide the other ones, disable them for just a minute. I'm going to run this script now, and let's guess what the result is going to be. If I click play now, it's going to shout out banana. So basically, this get function thing, it's like the first parameter is the full list. The second parameter is the number of item that you're targeting. So in our case, number 2 is 1, 2. So banana will be the answer. Similarly, we can kind of do like 3 in here. Do this, click, and we get peer. Now, in our case, this is related to one of the things that we want to do, and that is to get the first item within the list. So naturally, we will be doing something like get value before and then number 1. Like this, save this, play this, apple. So that's basically get value. Now the next one is a value count, and this is also really simple. It's basically something like this. So let me disable the first one, and let me just enable this one. Click this, and we are going to go do something like this. So value count. Now value count only takes in one single value. One single parameter. So I'm just going to put the whole list of value in here and just show you what it does. So when I click this play, it's going to shout out 4. So basically, it's just counting how many value is within this list of item here. Now, if I add in like a melon on the bottom, confirm this by clicking out the screen and click again, it's going to say 5. So we're counting how many values are like inside this specific parameter that we enter in. And that's basically it. Pretty simplistic. Let's disable this, and let's go into the next one. So write values, it's something a little bit different. Write values takes in 2 parameters. The first one is going to be, again, going to be something I put in the full list of item. So basically, I'm putting this full list here. Now, I'm going to do, let's do 1 in here. And click OK. And save this. And when I play this, it's going to say melon. So basically, in a list of value, the right-hand side, starting from the right-hand side, is actually from the bottom side. So I'm trying to get the first value counting from the bottom side up. So this is melon. So basically, that's the use of this right value. Now, one important distinction is that it's not the counterpart of get value. And I want to show you this. So if I type in 3 right now, what you originally might thought is like melon, orange, so the answer must be pear. But if I play this now, it's going to get melon, orange, and pear. So basically, it's trying to get multiple values starting from the bottom. So if I write in 3, it's going to count down from the bottom and get 3 items to the top. Something like this. And that's the idea. So if I do like 4 in here, click OK, and I play, it's going to start counting from the bottom all the way up. That's the idea behind it. But whereas get value is just targeting one specific value and getting its value number. And write value is targeting starting from the bottom and then counting up and getting 4 values and grouping them together to show you as the result. And let's disable this again, and let's go to the next line, which is let. Now, the first 3 values is going to be used to help us achieve that recursive function thing. But there's one very important function, which is the let function. It's not essential in setting up a recursive function, but if you don't use it, you're going to have a really hard time. So basically, the let function do something like this. Let function, you can ignore all this for now. Basically, let function takes in two parameters. The first parameter, I can do something like a equals 10, like that. And then the second parameter, I can do a. So basically, the first part of the let function is allowing you to give a value a name. So right now, I'm giving 10 a name as a. And then the second part is actually showing the result. So if I do a equals 10 as the first parameter and a as the second parameter, the result is going to be giving me back as 10. Now, the useful thing about this specific function is that it allows you to kind of keep everything in a very organized manner. So I can do like a times 25 like this. And then it's going to show me the result of 250. So now the other interesting thing about this is that you can place in multiple of these values together. So I don't have to limit to just writing a. So what I can do is I can add like a bracket at the start, a bracket at the end, and then I can write a semicolon to break this and go into the next one. B equals 12 and semicolon, C equals 8, like that. Now, right now in this setup, it's still two parameters that is being placed into let. The first parameter is this set of things. Now, within this specific set of parameter, there's like 3 items here, 1, 2, and 3. And between them, they are separated by this semicolon. And then that's the second parameter, which is the final result. And I can do something like a plus b plus c. And that is going to give me the final result of 8 plus 12 plus 10, which should be 30, if my math is correct. So if I click this now, it's going to give me 30. So basically, what I'm trying to say is this let function allows us to give some value, some name. So it makes it easier for us to manage the whole process together. But of course, in this example that I'm showing you right now, A, B, and C, it's not that obvious of why this is going to be useful. But when we're going to work on the recursive function, this is going to come in very handy. So now that you know the basics of how to use all these native FileMaker function, let's get into the juicy part, which is going to be the recursive function. So let's just quickly save this, close the script workspace, and let's go into File, Manage Custom Function. Now, what we're going to do is, again, we are trying to achieve the result of adding like an arrow key to all these before items. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new custom function that I call add arrow, like this. Oops. And this add arrow, it's going to only take in one single set of parameter. And I'm going to name that parameter the list. So basically, click this, and this is the parameter that we're taking in, and which is something that we're going to use. We're going to put this before set of value as this parameter into this function. Now, what I want to do first is I want to set up the foundation work for us to work on this function. And let's do the let thing. Again, let thing. And the let thing takes in 2 parameters. And on the top part here, I want a bracket here so that I can create multiple parameters in here. Now, what I want to do is I want to just quickly open up the file on the back in here so that we can kind of subtly reference to the logic that we're trying to achieve. So basically, we need to do a few things inside this function. What we need to do first is we need to take out the first value and then convert it. Now, what type of function do we need to get the first value? Now, as I said before, let's write in here the first one equals to get value, the list, and 1. So basically, I'm creating a new kind of like a value, and I'm going to name it the first one, and it's going to be equal to get value and the full list in here, the list, and I'm going to get the first item within the list. That's the first thing that I want to do, and I'm just going to do that. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to be able to have some sort of way to take out the rest of the item and put it back into the recursive function. So I need to prepare in advance how to do that. So I will probably need something that I call the res. So I'm creating another value that I'm naming the res. Now, the cool thing that we can do is that if you remember that we have this function called write values, right? And we are going to place in the list into it. And then we are going to assign some value. Now, what we did previously is that we know write value when you use the write value. And let's say this is 3. It's going to count down from the bottom 1, 2, 3 and take out 3 value. But what we want to do is not to just fix it to be taking 3 values. We want it to be taking out the rest. So if we have 2 value placed into the function, take out the first item, the rest is only 1 item. If we have 5 values here and we want to take out the rest should be 4 item. So depending on the size of the list, we want to have 1 less item, 1 less value inside here. So if the size of the list is 5 items, we want to take out 4 items from the bottom. Now, in order to do that, we need to set up something else first. And that is, we want to write out the list size in here. So we want to find out how big is the current list. And if you still remember, if we want to get the list size, we need to do value count. And then I'm going to count how many value is within this list. Now, once I have this list size thing set up, I'm going to copy this, paste it here, and then make it -1. So basically what I'm doing here is that this line, I'm getting the first value. This line, I'm trying to find out how big is the size of the list. And then this line, I'm trying to get the right value, counting from the bottom. And I'm going to get whatever the list size is, -1. So if there's 5 items here, I'm going to count from the bottom and take 4 items. Now, if there's only like 3 items here, let's say 1, 2, 3, this 3, I'm going to take out 2 items starting from the bottom. So this is what we are doing right here, right now. So once we set up these basic items, let's get into the final result of how we can achieve what we want. And let's do the whole thing step by step. Now, what I want to do is I want to go back to logic number 1, which is what we want to do is to convert the first value. And I'm just going to do that very simple thing first, which is I'm going to add like a string with an arrow key and a space bar and the first one. That's all I'm doing right now for this custom function. And let's click OK. Click OK again. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up this script and I am going to go to the recursive function convert. And then I'm going to do set field here. And target the after field. And in the calculation result, I'm going to use our custom function, add arrow, and we're going to place in before into this custom function. Click that and save this, and let's see if what we're doing is working. So let's click into convert. Now, as you can see, I am able to successfully take the first item and then add an arrow. But of course, this is not it. So let's go and continue working on our custom function. Double click into this and let's continue. Now, the next thing that I want is once I take in the first value, the next thing I want to do is I want to take out the rest and then put it back to the function itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an and as like a second part of this function. And what I'm going to do is I am going to, well, use add arrow again, which is the same function as this. I'm calling myself, and I'm going to place in the rest of the crew in here. So copy this, place it into this function. That's basically what we're trying to do. And then it's going to run through the loop again, and let's click OK just to see if it works. But there is some problem to it, so it probably doesn't work. But let's click convert. Now it's going to give me a question mark. It's not working. And there's a good reason for it, because what's happening is that we haven't really set up this if it's empty then stop thing. So basically it's running in like an infinite loop of going into the function again, and again. So that's why it's showing an error here, which is shown as a question mark. So what we want to do is we want to jump straight into the third part, which is going to be, if it's empty, then we stop it. Now, what we want to do is we do something like this. So we do an if-else statement. So if, and we're going to set a condition. Well, kind of, maybe I can group it like this. So now I am moving this a little bit just to organize. Okay, so if the list is empty, I'm creating a is empty function. If this list is empty, then we are going to return nothing as the answer. But if it contains one item or more, then we are going to run this script. So something like this. So to give you a better idea of how this whole thing is currently structured, maybe I can just indent them a little bit like this. Basically, this is the second part of the let function. And if the list is empty, then we're going to return the result as nothing to stop the whole thing. But if it contains one value or more, I'm going to take out the first value, and then I'm going to pick out the rest and then put it into himself again. So that's basically the kind of like the human language to explain what is this crazy mess happening. Now, if I have to reference back to this PowerPoint, what we are doing is essentially this spot right here. So remember when we go to peer, that's one value here. And then we're going to still put in the rest, which is nothing, into the next set of add arrow function. Now, because there's nothing in here, we are going to stop the loop and then just go backward like this. Basically, what I'm doing here is if it's empty, then I stop the whole loop. Otherwise, I return this whole thing. And that's the general idea behind this. So if I click OK right now and click OK, let's hope this whole thing works. But I think there's still one thing we need to do before this is actually complete. But let's see what we're going to have right now. When I click, let's click confirm. When I click convert, you will see that I'm actually kind of able to do what I'm trying to do. Like we have apple here with an arrow, and then arrow banana, arrow pear, but they kind of like crumble up all together. So what I want to do is probably add like an enter key between each of them, so that's probably going to be how we are showing the final result. So let's go into our file manage database. Well, sorry, file manage custom function, and let's go and continue working on this. Now, the problem is right now my first line and the rest of the crew who is going to be going to the recursive function, we don't have an enter key between them. So one simple way is to just do this: add an enter key between the two of them. Click OK, and let's remove all of them, and let's try that again. Convert, and we got it perfectly. So that's basically it for this tutorial. I hope that this concept is not too abstract for you. But there's one potential issue that I know some of you might be thinking, is that why do I want to use recursive function? In your specific use case, it's not that difficult to do it with other methods. So for example, you can kind of do something like this. So you can probably use like a substitute function to substitute these enter key into an enter key plus a arrow key like this, arrow key, arrow key, arrow key, arrow key. And then the first one, you add an additional arrow here to make it work. So inside a calculation formula, it might probably look something like this. So let's quickly try to do that. So we might be able to use substitute and then do take in the before, and then we are going to find all the enter key and then replace it with like an enter key plus an arrow key and a spacebar like this. And then the first item is also going to have like an arrow key added behind it, and it's going to probably achieve the same thing. So if I click this script right now, it's going to achieve the same thing. But the great thing about a recursive function is the versatility, because in this case, we are just adding an arrow key, which is a very simple action. But when we are working on recursive function, there's a lot of different things that we can do once we know how to set this up. So for example, if I go to File, Manage, Custom Function, and go into this add arrow thing, now instead of just making this an arrow key, I can also do something like, for example, I just want to do an upper, and also just to make this an upper cap, make all of them upper cap. And I also want to take out from the left side, I want to take out 3 characters starting from the left. So if apple is going to be APP, banana is going to be BAN, pear is going to be PEA, etc., etc. We can do that very easily using this method. So they are now both uppercased and also pick out the left 3 letter. So this is something that the substitute function cannot do that easily. So that's why you want to learn recursive function, because it's one of the great way for you to work on like a list of value like this without having to really have to go and create a new table and then use loop script and all that kind of crazy scripting. So that's basically it for this tutorial. I hope it's not too abstract, not too difficult, and I hope I explained it clearly. If you like this video, make sure to click the like button and comment on it. And yeah, I think I'm running out of things to say, and I will probably see you in my next tutorial. See ya.